Alright, time for another DraftPhysics.com video presentation. Now, unfortunately, a lot of videos to make because the noisemakers, the liars, the cheaters, the thieves, the pretty much just lousy, rotten human beings. I mean, they would bribe children, to perform for them, to, maybe even take off their clothes. It's just really, really creepy fuckers. Okay, they really don't care about the truth. They don't care about being fair. They don't care about having a rational conversation about how things work, or even a rational argument. An argument that has rational boundaries, where you're actually arguing the subject, and you argue it with facts, not lies. Okay, just made up crap, which this Brozo character just does. So anyway, and he is rewarded by the whole little gang of dissenters, the great honorable defenders of science. So far, every single one of these defenders, okay, has taken the unethical route and say, yes, let's take the easy cheat road to victory. Okay, let's slander, okay, and libel, and talk about subjects that have nothing to do with the physics at all, and just waste everybody's time. And people ask, how could you believe in a conspiracy that everybody is a jerk? Well, because you prove that everybody's a jerk. Because every time you show up to make an argument as a human being, you can't show any character or integrity. Every single instance, you fail. That's why I can believe it, is because it happens every single time. All right, you're perfectly shitty. Okay, your idiocracy function is 100%. The Borg of idiocracy. Okay, cheat, thieve, do whatever you have to do to fake your victory. So here he is again with this crap. Okay, anyway, mindless marbles blocking one slit. Now, this isn't mindless marbles innovation, right? I mean, the whole idea is you have a two-slit experiment, right? And you do something to try to block one of the slits. You either block it out here or you block it right at the surface. There's actually you can Google it, but I mean, there's an experiment where they did a pretty good job of sliding a very tiny thing over the tiny slit. So imagine they're tiny, remember? That's another thing people don't get, okay? It's only 1 millimeter of distance, less than 1 millimeter. The whole experiment happens in less than 1 millimeter. Anyway. I mean, this is just so bad. So this isn't mindless marbles' idea. Oh, god damn. Anyway, versus Gary Noob for brains who never even tried it. So where did you get any facts to defend that and to put it in capital letters? Of course I tried it. It's not very hard to just stick a piece of cardboard in front of the pattern. It's not very difficult at all. What I had was no way of understanding exactly how this changes things, because I'm just sticking another object into the experiment. So obviously I can't really block the slit without producing another surface. Duh. Oh, it's just so fucking stupid. Anyway, by the way, I will someone remind Gary that the two source, okay, so let's understand, I'm arguing that the two slit is the four source experiment, that it's scatter on the surfaces. Both the surfaces are scattering. Now I'm also arguing that if you're going to argue one of my videos, you ought to argue the newest ones, because frankly I have it more and more refined as a theory. I'm, less errors. And so I would appreciate you using the version of my theory that's the newest. That would be a courtesy. Now, I've asked for that courtesy repeatedly, and repeatedly mocked people who quote mine. They go out and find something I said that was inaccurate, didn't say it very well, and that's the argument they make. So they don't go for my best shot. They try to find my worst case. So again, just more evidence that, well, if you had the truth, Wouldn't you want to defeat the guy on his best day? You wouldn't pick the day he has the flu, would you? And then feel all proud of yourself because you beat him on the day he has the flu? No, but that's, again, just more evidence of the low character. So I have a website, debatephysics.com. And most of those videos, I would argue, are videos worthy of an argument, a counter-argument. And clearly they're in chronological order. You pick the newest videos. At least something more current than years ago, which he has done. I haven't used a blackboard in years. Oh, just amazing. What a lousy, scummy human. Just despicable. Okay, so again, the source I'm saying are the surfaces. The whole experiment, all the photons that create the fringe pattern, as I have repeatedly stated, I'm arguing every piece of evidence is consistent with the idea that the photons, the stuff that's making the pattern, all of the fringe pattern, comes from photons that are located essentially as their source from one of the surfaces. So the two slit is, the single slit is really the two surface experiment. The double slit is the four surface experiment. AKA radar interference pattern. So the radar one, nobody's done the four source experiment, the true double slit parallel to the radar experiment, because they don't even understand the idea, so it doesn't even occur to them to say, hey, what if we had four sources of radar? Then we'd have overlapping patterns, and then we could create a double slit pattern. Didn't even occur to them because they're so wrong-headed. Anyway, all right, so he says here, I don't know why he has to do this capital letter thing. It's just so obnoxious for reading. AKA radar interference pattern does not make the single slit pattern. So, yeah, it does. But the difference is the radar is millions, okay, probably 100 million times. The sources are 100 million times further apart. See? 100 million times. 100 million times. See, the light experiment happens in this tiny little space. What? Less than a millimeter. The radar experiment happens in gigantic space. Huge. So when you're actually projecting it to a smaller space in some cases, but anyway, you're projecting something gigantic. And so the same effect doesn't happen because you can see if the sources are feet across, separated by feet, not a millimeter, feet, you can understand that the stuff going in, see, in the experiment, from scatter from 2 points, you can understand some of the light's going in and some of the light's going out that way. So the sources, the two scatter points, some of their photons both go in the same direction, and then some of their photons go in opposite directions to hit the board. That's how it'll work. And obviously when you have two sources really far apart, you're going to have a different result because you'll have plenty of this kind of interference, the kind going in, because they're feet apart. But in the light experiment, when your source is a millimeter and you're projecting it on a screen where the pattern's going to be feet across, obviously you're not going to see what was inside of the 1 millimeter. Everything going in, it'll be invisible. So he's such a fucktard. Ugh. Anyways, so obviously the interference pattern doesn't make the double maxima because the patterns don't overlap, because there's two kinds of diffraction. If you look it up, there's Frunzenfarzer and Fresnel or something, so there's two F named, and one of them is basically describing interference going in, and one of them is describing interference that goes out. Yeah. Okay, that is characterized by a double slit central maxima. So what characterizes the double slit, okay, is the fact that there are two patterns. That's the big thing that makes the difference. So let's just do this one more time. It won't be one more, right? Because the liars and the cheaters and the bums, they just can't care about the truth. They just can't do it. So the double slit pattern is two patterns, okay? The little ones, and then there's groups of little ones, okay? And if you look, the envelope, it's called, okay? This pattern of bigger things is called the envelope pattern. And you'll see that the envelope is double. You'll see that this, okay, is really two of these smashed together, overlapping. So this has really got four, but you can't see them because they're overlapping. You see? This is 2 and 2, and this would be 4, but they're overlapping. Okay, so you always have an odd number in the middle, and you always have a, you know, you can have 3 here, 4 here, 5 here. If you had 5 here, then you would have 11 here. See? That's how it works. That's the truth. That's what the real pattern does. And the single slit has the double maxima, so the single slit's duplicating. And guess what? The single slit is when the slits are really, really close together. So that's why there's an overlap, because they're really, really, really close together. And when they're further apart, the further it's apart, like say if I did a double slit and the two outside surfaces, right? So here's the double slit. Yeah, we'll just make this a square. And here's the other surface. Okay. So if you take the geometry of the widest distance, okay, between two surfaces, that's what's creating the little dots. So the little dots are being made by the very widest distance, and there's no double maxima, right? But the narrowest distance between two surfaces, okay, that's very, very small, okay, a tiny percentage of the millimeter, and that's where this big pattern comes from. So the big pattern comes from the small distance. Small distances between surfaces create big pattern. Okay, big distances from surfaces create little pattern, little dots. So I've been over and over that. You're just like, God, these people are so petty. All right. It's just dismal. I just can't believe that people support this kind of low-grade, low-brow, cheap shot bullshit tactics. They think this is the way argument should take place. That they're all, by complete consensus, joining on this bad band playing. This is just such bullshit. This disgusting, putrid bandwagon, and these cowards like Piro reward this putz. This coward Piro, who can't make a video anymore for some reason, right, is incapable of countering any of these arguments, illustrating how anything I just said about these experiments is in any way wrong. So every time I say in a video, well, just explain how anything I just said in this segment of video is wrong, they won't do it. And instead they quote mine. They'll dig up old videos and pretend they can take advantage of me being less than perfectly articulate. I assume that I didn't make that mistake here. It's just that Brozo doesn't understand the physics. Okay. Oh, God. This is just so disgusting. This is characterized by a double slit central maxima. Okay, so we know what characterizes the two patterns is the fact that one of them has two patterns in it, and one of them only has one pattern. We know that's what characterizes the two patterns. Oh, amazing. Central maxima compared to the maxima fringes, not, as he claims, by the absence of the envelope pattern. Well, the absence of the envelope pattern is pretty distinctive, I'd say. So I think if you want to know the difference between a single slit and a double slit, you just look for the absence of the envelope pattern. And guess what? If it's absent, well, yeah, there won't be any double maxima because all you have left are the further apart sources. Moron. We can't see an envelope pattern in the two source radar. Yeah, because it's only two sources. I mean, obviously I'm claiming the double slit, okay, is really a four source experiment. In the radar, it's not a four source experiment. In the radar experiment, you're not shining radar through a slit to create two sources, presumably, but it's really four sources. It's two flashlights. It's only two. There's no four sources, retard. Oh, God, he's so stupid. All right, maxima compared to the other maxima fringes. Okay, not the envelope. We can't see an envelope pattern in the two-source radar interference experiment because the transmitter horns would have to be much wider apart. Isn't that a funny line? They're already 100 million times further apart. 100 million. It might even be a billion, frankly. I mean, a nanometer compared to a millimeter, that might be a billion. They're a billion miles from each other. Anyway, to properly mimic single slit experiment. So just more nonsense. You can only mimic the single slit experiment by having more than, okay, two sources. You have to have four sources, four surfaces. You have to duplicate the existence of four surfaces. Alright, and that just isn't practical for us novice experimenters. So again, he calls himself a novice. If this is how you learn how to be an experimenter, you're doing it all backwards. You're never going to fix a car. You're just never going to get it right. I mean, it's just disgusting that you call himself a novice anything. You're a professional liar is what you are. You have real credentials as a liar, an exaggerator, a troll. Okay. Because the pattern would be spread over such a wide distance and be so weak anyway. So, more nonsense. Radio does this, frankly. I've already explained that radio stations already do this over miles and miles of distance. You can create this very phenomenon by having a radio station in Pennsylvania and one in New York City, and the two of them will compete at a location at the speed of light, okay, and they'll both be hitting an antenna, and they'll actually be creating the pattern of interference, quote unquote, of jamming. They'll jam each other, and then they'll be okay because they'll be out of phase, and they'll be back in phase, and then they'll be out of phase, and they'll be in phase. And they will, in fact, create the pattern. Because the pattern would be spread over such a light, week anyway, and that would be difficult to detect anything. So again, that's an experiment I could show MIT doing the experiment with radio waves. Yes, it was done on a football field. No problem. Okay, if there is no double with central maxima, so again, he's saying this. There is a double maxima in the envelope. Clearly, it's clearly double in the center. In the sense that it's, no one ever proved it was double in the single slit, right? No one's done exact measurements. So again, it's one less than double. Okay, so double 2 is 4, and so it's one less than 4. All right. Then it can't possibly be a single slit pattern. So again, just another lie. It's just 1/2 of the pattern, and if the half you keep is the small distance, you'll have a double maxima. If the half you keep is the furthest distance, you'll have no maxima. No double maxima. So all of this video, whatever's going to be in it, is absolute crap. And it's 18 minutes long. I mean, frightening. I haven't seen it yet, so who the hell knows. I just, reading the comments was just so dismal. I mean, these liars and this disgusting invasion of, bringing up just slanderous libel. Look, I'll let you people know, okay, if I ever get any money to defend my civil rights, I'm going to sue you for libel and slander. So just understand, you can't just get away with saying things that you have no facts to base it on. Especially if, like, Fox News told you so. That's not good enough. You can't go to the court and say, Fox News told me so. You know, that kind of thing. All right? The fact is, I mean, people are bringing up all kinds of crap. Yeah, I got into a lawsuit defending my civil rights. A judge in Texas completely abolished all of those legal rights. All my rights to file a complaint and have my redress of grievances. He just violated it all, okay, because he didn't want to deal with the subject. He threw it in the garbage. I told the judge, this is all I did. I said, you're violating my constitutional rights. And then I made a video explaining that's what just happened. An asshole, a complete fucktard, just violated my civil rights. And then I paid to go to an appeals court as a pro se, right? Pretty gutsy move. And I completely won. I didn't partially win. I completely won. In the Fifth Circuit Federal Appeals Court completely agreed with me that this judge completely violated all of my constitutional rights, and he was thrown off the case. Now, Fox News decided to make me some kind of whack job and decided that the judge is some kind of honorable, decent person, even though the federal appeals court threw him off the case because he was incompetent. So you can't turn that into Gary did something illegal. I never was cited for contempt of court. I was never ticketed for anything. I wasn't summoned to anything. I was just slandered, period. And you slandering me on top of their slander isn't some innocent thing you're doing. So fuck you people for this disgusting lie that I ever did anything inappropriate in a courtroom. Because it never fucking happened. You lying scum. Alright. So Piro says 100% conclusive. Nicely done. I mean, just amazing lies. Conclusive for what? He's proving my theory. Okay, there's no way he can't do otherwise. Yeah, so right here. They are also on a federal watch list. Yeah, not because I did anything wrong. I'm on a watch list because a judge complained, okay, that a litigant is claiming I don't know what I'm doing and I'm an incompetent fucktard. He can't do that. So because a judge whined that he doesn't like being ridiculed, right? Is that what you're going to defend? You're going to defend judges have the right to put you on a watch list because you ridiculed them? You're really going to defend that? Oh, amazing. Okay, for the protection of federal judges for threatening to... So I didn't threaten anyone. It's a lie, okay? And I'm going to sue you because that's a lie. You have no evidence. You will play no piece of a video where I made any threatening gesture whatsoever. It's a lie, you fuck. Okay. I just, they can't get any fact right. They can't get a physics fact right. They can't get, it's just disgusting that this group of fucking lying scum can get away with this. This cult of liars. Oh. Now, I'll take a pause. Collect myself, and we'll play the fucktards video. Alright, so leave us commence with the horror of the disgusting, slimy, disease-covered, grotesque human being, okay, making his lie, slander, bullshit argument of some kind that I will perfectly, okay, demonstrate to be perfectly consistent with everything I've said. Oh, this is really starting off really great. Okay, can't read any of this slop. Who cares?
So again, it doesn't happen.
No, that was great, wasn't it? I mean, that was just so viewable. So he expects you to go frame by frame through this moronic video. Amazing. Amazing.
Happen.
Okay, this is so old. I mean, I haven't used the cutout thing for like 10 years. Well, let's say it's like 5 years at least. 7 years. This was before, actually, I had created the draft. I mean, it was like back, okay, yeah, I had the draft. I certainly didn't have the debate physics channel. But yeah, these are the little bulldozers. I mean, this is way, way, way back. So again, exactly what I plead with people not to do. I really don't want to delete my old videos. I mean, is that really what somebody has to do on the internet now? They have to delete, like Einstein would have to go back and erase, like take back all his old previous book. Oh, look, in my first edition, I said some things that weren't too perfect. Please don't argue that crap. I mean, this is such a petty move. I mean, I have repeatedly stated, if you have any balls at all, please argue my most current arguments, not the ones from 7 years ago. Because, yeah, some of those are a little flawed. But they won't do that. Because they have to cheat. They have to quote mine the argument. They can't deal with the real argument. No place has just drawn that if you open one slit and then you add the second slit, no place gets darker. Okay, so that's an experiment really hasn't been done. Okay, it's not very practical to try to do it because there's no such thing as single photons and all this other bullshit. But anyway, continuing. That's a separate phenomenon, okay, of arguing that because you're shifting the location of the pattern that you can make something disappear. Obviously, when you're when you cover one of the slits with a opacancy or some other thing, you're changing the pattern fundamentally. So obviously this idea that you can cover one of the slits and you're destroying two of the sources, you've completely converted the experiment from a double slit into a single slit. And you've basically said, I'm taking away two of the sources.
There's no evidence that happens.
So the relative comparison between the light and dark is a matter of contrast. So, I mean, this is kind of a complex subject. You have to know something about camera exposures and all this other stuff. But see, the real truth is that in these spots where there's no light, there actually is light. Okay, so you just can't see it based on the relative brightnesses. So these spots here, there actually is a dot here because two of the sources do line up. The two outside surfaces are actually sending photons there. It's just too few. And it's only when you add the other two surfaces that you have more little bits hitting, more sunlight. And so then you can see them. But you can only see them when four sources hit. So where there's only two sources, the light is dim. Where there's four sources, the light becomes very, very bright. Twice as bright. 4 times as bright, actually. Just because of the way you're creating a higher probability of there being a photon at a particular location by adding two sources. So the real truth is there actually is a dot here. Now if I take two sources away, you can understand I've diminished the light by 1/4. By 4 times. It's 1/4 of the light. So eliminating one surface, covering one surface, takes away 3/4 of the light. And so now you're making comparisons between very dark and not so dark. Now you can see the elements that weren't visible before because you've got a very dark line here now. It's much darker. And so you can see this because these brightnesses, these bright spots aren't polluting your view. There's no bright spots anymore. So now you can see the dimmer lights. And it's that simple. And so this idiot who can't know the difference between 14 and 16, this moron doing his rickety experiment says he can tell these differences. And he doesn't even know what a camera exposure is, frankly. So obviously you can understand if anybody's used a camera, there's exposure issues, and this camera can automatically compensate for the lack of light or the abundance of light. And so it automatically changes its exposure. So it's automatically changing the brightness and lightness of light and spots. And so you can see things, okay, based on those contrast settings. And unless you have a camera that doesn't do that automatically, you have no chance of getting an accurate picture of the pattern. A consistently fair picture, the same picture. But these are details, right? Nobody cares about the details. You're scientists, you know. Why science should care about a detail? Pfft, that sounds so silly. So these arguments were already made about contrast.
So here's a double slit with one slit blocked. Now let's go and have a look at the pattern. Put light on. So single slit pattern. Over that decimeter from that arrow to that arrow. That's the central maximum, isn't it? Okay. So 10 centimeters, 1 decimeter. Now, make a mental note of where we have light. All across that distance, don't we? Now, I go back to the double slit. Now let's unblock it.
So let's understand, this is how stupid he is. Okay,
yeah. Let's move the blocking out. So now we can do both slits.
Now it's
so
four times, the pattern's 4 times brighter. So he hasn't changed the exposure. Look, you can see the tape measure so much better, right? So I should show the 2 images just to demonstrate. Okay, so unless you understand, this pattern has actually got little pattern in it. You just can't see it. And you will be able to see it when you're going to increase or decrease the light source. So obviously the 2 patterns will look different depending on in what contrast you take the picture. He's taken these 2 pictures and
now
changed
make a
their
mental
contrast,
note.
right? Look how unblack, you know, how undark the surface is compared to the light. Okay, so let's just do this. Alright.
Light, no light. So Richard Feynman wasn't lying.
Richard Feynman didn't even touch this subject, and you know, and frankly, again, you realistically, they're 2 fundamentally different patterns, because by taking away 2 of the sources, you've fundamentally changed where the possibility of light and dark being. You haven't left some sort of source, you know, and you've added another source, because the 4 sources have this multiple effect of causing there to be more places where there'll be fringe light. So again, you can't see that in his, because the photo has been compensated. This pattern is substantially brighter. So just understand, he took away half the light. It's really 4 sources, so it's really 2 sources, and so, but you don't see any difference in these 2 photos, right? They look just as bright as each other, right? So if I go back and we look at this versus this, they look like they have equalish brightness, and it's a substantial difference in the brightness. All right.
There and there, it was all light before. Now we have no light, no light, no light.
So again, the argument is yes, now you do have no light. But whatever. You know, by comparison, just because you can't see the light, because frankly you have 4 times the number of photons matching.
No light, no light. So Richard Feynman wasn't lying.
So that's the one they never prove. They have no experiment demonstrating. There's no hope that that could make sense or be correct. So they're asserting as a fact. So this is the mystery that has to be solved, is this fake, phony mystery.
And just understand the very idea, okay, that you can have something in the universe, a photon, going to a location, and you can stop it from getting there with your magic photons that are somehow going to stop the photon. I mean, just think how stupid that is as a premise. That should require kind of extraordinary evidence, not less than ordinary evidence.
that doesn't exist as a real fact. So you're accepting a false notion of an outcome that just isn't correct. It's not based on...
Okay, so again, I already did this. Right, so I already made this contrast argument. They didn't debunk it in some way. He didn't prove his camera didn't change the exposure. So, meaningless.
Science or evidence, it's based on an assumption, based on a wrong, a misplaced drawing. So there is no, it was bright and then I opened a second slit and it got dark. There's no evidence that happens.
Would you like me to magnify that for you? If you can't see these gaps where there's no light...
Okay, so again, the argument's already been made, okay? We don't see them because you don't have the equipment to see these things as they are, okay? You're seeing them based on human capacity to make these proper contrast comparisons. Our eyeball does the same thing, okay? I mean, the pupil gets big, pupil gets small. It's changing the exposure.
I do worry about your eyesight, but just let me magnify it for you anyway. We have darkness where there was light before. Can you see? Double slit, obviously. Now try and make it into a single slit. Block off one of the slits. Is that it? 1, 2. Try and block off one, not both.
So, do you see any huge difference in the brightness here? No. Right? I mean, it's 4 times brighter. I'm just saying 4 times brighter should really show up, and it really doesn't show up.
We blocked off just one there. Right, so we blocked off just one there. So you can see, we now have light where we didn't have light before. Let's come back again so you can see. So we have a single slit now, light where we didn't have it before. We open up the second slit, and we have places where there's no light. Hang on.
See? No bright.
Yeah.
Okay, 4 times the number. 4 times the number of photons. Is this image any brighter? No. 4 times the photons. Any brighter? No. Okay.
Light by opening up a second slit. I'll put the magnifying glass in front of it again. There we go. So we have darkness where we had light before. Zoom in. Trying to see any sign of...
So you can understand if you make it 4 times brighter, okay, that from your vision, you're looking at it, you're not going to see these distinctions, these little lines. So he's pointing out, look at the little lines.
Light in the dark places. Count again. Done my best.
So again,
it's not good enough.
No place that, if you open one slit and then you add the second slit, no place gets darker. There's no evidence that happens.
So the area we are interested in is this bit in the middle.
Okay,
yes.
So you can see it right there. Look at the haziness here, right? So all you do is change the contrast, and that haziness is all of a sudden light. And all you're really saying is the extra slit is making photons here, it's not making photons here. It's making photons here, it's not making photons there. That's all. The light is still there. Alright, it's just that it's 1/4 of the light now, because you've added the extra sources. By adding the extra sources, you've completely washed this out. It's like looking at stars, right? And they complain because we're shooting a bunch of light up into the atmosphere and it's creating a bunch of photons that bounce back down and it's causing noise. Same kind of effect. You're eliminating your capacity to see something because you have now 3/4 more photons, okay, interfering with your view of that location. But you can see it right there. It's there. So, I mean, this whole thing is just such a... Well, you probably can't see it. But you can see that, oh yeah, if I just change this contrast, this will get brighter and brighter, and it'll be light.
Gary reckons that this bit in the middle isn't actually darker than it was before when it was a single slit. He reckons that this is the same brightness as it was before, that it only looks dark.
Yes, no, it only because you don't understand how to use a camera, okay, and you don't understand exposure settings, and that you got to use a camera where you can control those settings and make sure they're exactly the same, and you didn't do any of that. So your camera has been changed the exposure, changed how many photons it's letting into the camera, okay, and just destroyed your understanding of black and white. Everybody can understand you can do that. I mean, I could change the contrast right now of this video, right? I can sit there and change the properties, and I can make me look completely different by just changing what the camera is going to take in as photons. I mean, should I show you? I mean, you know, I guess I could just show you. I can do it with abandon, okay? I can take away all the color, right? Easy, and then I can zoop this up, and I can turn me into, you know, essentially a black and white image. If I do this, I could make a cartoon out of it. Yeah, I can take away so much of the image and the visibility. So it's just, you know, to not understand that's a reality, that you can completely change what you can see in the image by applying these different kinds of filtering mechanisms, and that cameras routinely do this because your pictures would look like shit if it didn't. If it didn't adjust the exposure, then all your pictures would look like shit.
By comparison to the maxima either side, which are now 4 times intensity. So if it's an optical illusion, then we can destroy that optical illusion by blanking out the maxima. We can blank.
So again, he just doesn't deal with the real subject, so no point. And then he does all this video editing.
Out the maxima, yes, so that we're no longer distracted by the optical illusion, if it is an optical illusion. So we can see the bit in the yellow, we can see that for what it actually is, yes? So, let's take a snapshot. So that bit in the yellow is supposed to...
Okay, so again, he doesn't understand what camera exposure is. He doesn't, so is this really a rational argument he's making when he doesn't understand that cameras change the exposure? How many photons they're seeing?
Do the same brightness, according to Gary. That bit in the yellow is supposed to be the same brightness as it ever was when it was.
That's a lie. Yes, it is the same amount of photons, but now it doesn't. You're not comparing it to 2 dark spots. You're not comparing it to a standard black. So there's no standard black here. He's created fake black.
It was a single slit. It hasn't gone darker just because we made it into a double slit. So let us test that hypothesis out by swapping it with the other drawing. Now I have to expand that drawing though to the original size marked by those arrows. Sorry, you can't see the 2 arrows. I mean, I put 2 arrows at the top of the page so I could align the 2 pictures and make sure that they stayed in the same position when I enlarged them. Okay, that's with 2 slits open, and
Alright, so he's saying my claim is wrong. You can just see from the
image 2 arrows at the top
that there's nothing wrong, because obviously they have the same black. They can't have the same black background. Okay, not possible. He's created, okay, to make the thing visible.
Top of the page so I could align the 2 pictures and make sure that they stayed in the same position when I enlarged them. So it's the same brightness, Gary reckons, but doesn't look the same brightness to me. No. Take a snapshot of that. So Gary,
all fake. So this is fake. Okay, this isn't the real contrast settings. The 2 photographs don't have the same contrast settings. It's just fake.
He reckons that when we open up the second slit, that doesn't go darker. That bit in the yellow area does not go darker. But go back again. But I reckon it does, don't you? Now let's go back again.
So again, he's showing it. There's obviously something there. So he's going to pretend there's nothing there when obviously there's something there. It's not black. And the 4 times argument is real. So again, if it's 4 times as bright when 2 slits are open, then I guess, you know, you could say it's at least twice as bright, right? You'll get that far. But because, like I said, there's 4 sources, it increases the probabilities. So, but anyway, let's continue.
Just want to expand it back to the same dimensions. So, again, there you go. A, B, just to be clear. Okay, that's with 2 slits open.
and snake oil salesman mouth. And on the one hand, he'll say that these dark bands in the double slit are never totally dark, and therefore the argument that...
So this is Farley, okay? He's that's in the video. So again, this is all you expect as a proof. So they didn't measure it with a detector, you know, like you just put a photo detector in a location, all right, and see if you know, you could make the argument that somehow you have less photons are hitting the photo detector. So this hasn't been done with a photo detector that counts the number of photons hitting the area.
Open it.
They aren't. So, okay, so let's just say, is that a fact or not a fact? Oh yeah, that's right, it's a fact. But anyway, let's continue.
A second slit causes less light to reach this point is invalid because...
So a second slit, so he's going back to an experiment already debunked. So there's this theory in physics that's never been proven, never been demonstrated by anything called evidence. There, let's understand, evidence would be collecting the actual number of photons. So again, you can just place photo detectors. You could even use solar panels. You can use anything that counts photons, essentially, counts the volume of photons. Our eyesight doesn't do that well because, again, your pupil just keeps changing how much light it lets in. The camera does the same thing. Okay, so it's flawed unless you understand that, oh yeah, you have to use the same exposure settings on the camera and then compare two pictures with the same exposure settings. You can't... No, anyway, I've already said it. There is no evidence anywhere that this thing happens. He's claiming it does happen and he has proof, but he has zero evidence. So it's been cited by lots of physicists, just like they cite photon detectors and all that stuff. No evidence anybody ever made a photon detector for a slit experiment. When I talked about detecting, I'm talking about detecting the volume of photons, not detecting a photon passing. Okay, you can't detect a photon passing without the photon being destroyed. You can't see a laser beam with a you can't see the photons that go to the target. You can only see the photons that don't go to the target. No evidence that ever happened in the history of physics, because frankly no physicist would be stupid enough to think it's possible that you could watch a photon passing by. Okay, no physicist thinks that's possible. I mean, no one that went to school or got an education. So that part, I'm talking about the detectors, okay? So they won't deal with that fact that, oh yeah, that's true, that all of that's been a big fat lie. Okay, there was never any photon detector. They never did any photon detecting. Those experiments never took place. The Dr. Quantum video, for example, is a huge giant lie. You know, when we're watching the photons, we can't watch photons. We can only see where they terminate. We can only see when they do their electricity thing, essentially. For a degree, no one believes that's possible. So of course they never did it. And yet, but they talk about it. It's one of their fables. It's one of their little stories in their religious thing, you know, where they have those little stories about what David did or this guy did or that. These are little fairy stories they tell, okay, in their religion. And that's all it is. So in the, okay, so I'm drawing this as best I can. Obviously, you know, there's no script here, blah, blah, blah. So I am hoping I won't make any mistakes. Double slit experiment, there's this theory, okay, this contention, this whatever you want to call it, this bullshit that they made up, okay, so there's distances between these. Well, I'll put them in as accurately as possible. Let's just do it the way it actually looks. Alright, so let's just say we have 4 things in the middle, then we have the dead spot, and then we have, you know, 2 here, and we have 2 over here. Okay, and that's pretty much accurate enough. So they have this contention that, okay, so I have the slits here, 2 slits, okay, that's pretty obvious, right? Can't confuse it. And they have this argument that if I have them both displaying and they're both
no, I just open one. So I close. So let's understand that the double slit is visible. You're looking at half of the single slit part. You know, both slits, two sources over here, two sources over here, are creating the light spots. So the parts that light aren't going to get dark, and the parts that are dark aren't going to get light in any substantial way, besides the fact that the two sources still exist as independent two sources. And all you're really changing is the ones that are four, where you get four sources, those are the ones you can see. And the ones where there's two sources you can't see. That's the light and dark in this pattern. The light and dark in this pattern is, this pattern, the single slit, this envelope is already there. It's underneath this. It's already there, two sources. The little dot pattern, the dot right here, is really there. Okay, so why doesn't he do that? Take the double slit experiment and look at this little dark spot here, and you can show that, oh yeah, I can make that visible by changing the contrast. By changing the contrast, this will become very bright. Not very bright, but I mean it'll become brighter. Okay, because light's still going here. It's just not enough. There's not enough photons hitting here. All right, and that's the simple truth, because you don't have the two other sources to amplify to create a spot here. So it's only two sources. Two outside sources are hitting where the dots are. And where the dots aren't is where the two outside sources are out of phase. So you can see that the single slit, the one slit pattern, the smallest dimension, is already there. And all you're doing is adding the second pattern. You're adding two more sources. You're amplifying the light in these other locations. But the dark spots aren't really dark. So that's the one he should zoom in on, is these dark spots between. Because if he zooms in on them, he'll see, oh yeah, there's really photons there. There's just not as many. 1/4 less. One of the slits. Their theory is, okay, that there'll still be some sort of pattern, I would argue there will too. It'll be something like this maybe. Okay. And what they're arguing is that when I open this other... So they're taking away the two sources. Those are the outside sources are essentially the sources that are creating the little pattern. So you basically abolish the little pattern and you're just stuck with the background single slit. The two source experiment with 1/4 the light. Slit, right? So this spot, when one slit is covered, they say this location is light, and this location is light, and this location is light. So unlike the double slit, where it's a dark, they say it's a light. All right, because when I close, so just that's all it comes down to. So again, if you don't have a camera that's going to compensate for the fact that, let's say, just at minimum, it's twice as much light. You can't understand that if I open a second slit, it's at least twice as much. At least. That's a lot of light. That's a lot of extra photons. So when I close one slit, this is the pattern. If I close this slit and open this slit, the fact is I'll get, the pattern's going to be in almost exactly the same place, right? Because this distance isn't enough to... It's a millimeter. Yes, less than a millimeter of distance. Obviously, I'm not going to see that in a foot-long pattern. So if I close one side, I'm going to jitter this a little tiny. It'll move a little tiny fraction of the distance. It'll move the 1/2 of a millimeter in a foot of pattern. So I can move the pattern by a millimeter, but that's it. Because there are two separate sources. There's two sources here, there's two sources here. It's the 4-source experiment. You've taken away two of the sources. Two sources. Change it so it'll look like this. Okay, that's how they're going to look like if I open them as single slits. Okay, but when I open them as a double slit, I'm invoking this longer distance. See, and that's the key distance to making the little bars. So anyway, so he's not refuting any of this. You do notice he's just letting the video play. So all of these points he's just ignoring. So it really doesn't matter which slit I open or which slit I close. This
pretending that somehow he's dealt with this very fact. The fact is that the only reason why there's a double slit pattern is because of this very large distance. The difference between two single slit patterns, okay, it's not this and this. It ends up being this, the outside dimension, and the inside dimension. That's how you turn two slits, two same things, into something very different, because now you've created a single slit pattern, you could argue, from the very wide distance, and a single slit pattern from the very narrow distance. Those are the two you end up matching. You're bringing this giant slit experiment and this tiny slit experiment together. You're not bringing two of these and overlapping them. That's not what you're doing. You're creating this big distance, this little distance. That's a fact that they won't refute.
is what the pattern is going to look like. Now they think, Feynman will draw it. Feynman will draw this like that. He'll draw, well, this one will make a hump over here, and then this one will make a hump over here. That's how they'll draw it.
So that's yes, and it's a complete lie. It doesn't happen that way. So it's a complete inaccuracy Feynman does, and he's not saying a damn thing, is he? Is he conceding the argument that yes, Feynman's analysis is complete nonsense? Just like when they say, well, the center has to be a maxima because it's equal distance from the two surfaces. It's equidistance inside of a millimeter. It's such an infinitesimally small spot on the screen that you can't see it. All the stuff going in is invisible because it's inside of a millimeter of the foot-long pattern. It's just nonsense to say, I can see that. No, you can't see that. So there's no obligation for the center to be an on. Okay, none at all. But anyway, but this idea that, okay, I have a millimeter of distance between these two things projecting the light, and the very idea that they say if I close one of them I get a hump over here, and if I close the other one I get a hump over there, that doesn't happen. They're not going in different directions. They're going straight as a millimeter. And so that's the big lie, that the two patterns would be exactly on top of each other except for a tiny millimeter of difference. So in a foot there would be a millimeter of difference. You're just talking about the slightest little wobble. The two lumps would be right on top of each other. That's a fact, another fact. It's an absolute fact. Okay? And physics has lied about it and told this fake story that, oh, you would expect one to be way over there and you'd expect one to be way over... No, the slit pattern's happening straight. The millimeter is still a millimeter on the surface. The position of the slits does not change with distance. It doesn't spread. The fringes spread. Where the straight photons go does not spread.
So even though it's only a millimeter of distance, this entire experiment, they think that these two patterns happen way over here from each other, like they're way off center. But anyway, that part doesn't matter. So back to the point. So
yeah.
Obviously
it does matter, because it's just more evidence of how lazy they are in thinking about or in analyzing any of this. So it just shows how lazy and sloppy their physics is. They just couldn't care less about these details. And frankly, that's a really important detail. Understanding that the two patterns will be seen exactly on top of each other, just about, is a really important fact. If I cover one slit, the single slit pattern created will be its same pattern as if I cover the other slit, because they're going to hit almost the same exact location.
This is a continuous pile of light. So there's actually, so when one slit is open, their argument is that there's light going to these locations. And then when they open this, that light disappears. All right. So there's zero evidence that's the truth. No credible experiment. Now the only one he linked me to was a Christian scientist, a physicist who's a Christian.
So again, I don't see how he wins by making this argument. Farley had no counter argument to the fact that he was a Christian physicist, and the fact is, I pointed out how you can actually buy, okay, from he bought a little kit that does this experiment, and you can actually buy the filter, okay, that actually just doesn't count photons anymore. I mean, it's designed to take out the noise, and the fact is the signal is in the noise, so it's destroying the signal. So I mean, I pointed it out. You can buy the filter that actually. I mean, again, I already debunked this. To have to do it a second time? No, fuck that. And the experiment he did sucked. Okay, we got no details, saw nothing, and he was using an electronic filter. That is something that only accepted photons that came at a certain speed. So if I actually at a rate, so by speed I mean the photons were coming at a certain rate, and as soon as the rate goes too high, it filters them all out. Or the rate went too slow, it filters them all out. So the very idea that you could see small sources was annihilated. If we made more photons, it would register fewer photons, because the more photons I make, the more it cancels them out because they're too close together, if you get me. So he had a filter. So exactly. So the filter just basically annihilated the equipment's ability to see it. Imposed that actually canceled when I open the second slit. It's actually canceling the light. So of course that's how it looked. But it's doing essentially the same thing as a bad aperture, in the sense that it was just saying, well, anytime you have the light, then I'm going to reduce the number of photons I'm going to count, because I'm not going to count photons that come at a high rate. So as soon as the rate goes up, I'm going to stop counting. Come on. Fair cop? No. Anyway, so completely fraudulent. I mean, you can't trust Christian physicists. Get real. But anyway, complete fraudulent experiment. So I already have the video up. I've already done this debunk. And here he is raising the same argument as if he has one shred of evidence anywhere in the annals of physics demonstrating that this actually gets darker. The truth is when you have one slit open, you're only getting light from one source. So if they were heads and tails you were throwing at the wall, well, you have two sources, obviously, I'm arguing. And so you're throwing heads and tails from just two sources. When you double the sources, you quadruple the capacity to make matches. And so it's just completely untrue that if I close one of the slits, a spot that was light gets dark. It never happens. It's just that with the single slits open, these two patterns are so faded, okay, that you really don't see what's happening. And when right, so that it's just noise pollution. So the simple argument is both patterns are two source patterns. The two source patterns are still there. I mean, look, ultimately my argument is even where there are darks, technically the energy's still hitting. Okay, it's still pieces of photons. They're just not visible photons now. They're just energy. So if they did a heat signature, if they did this by detecting the heat that's hitting, the pressure, the photonic pressure, they would probably find that yes, it's all the same. There's not going to be a pattern. Anyway, there's no point going through the whole Veritasium lie. So again, he didn't respond to any of this. Did you notice he didn't pause it and say, okay, here's count? No, nothing. So all of this is just, what's the point? What's the point of playing the video if you're not going to argue the arguments in the video? You do combine them. When you open both slits, it's like you added 4 of these. All right, now you have 4 times the potential to make a matches. All right, and so now the spots that do match get much brighter because there's 4 times the number of capacity to make matches. So these spots get much brighter. They get 4 times brighter when you open the second slit. The light spots get 4 times brighter. That makes this look dark. All right, so I'll just go with twice, just to be fair. So I can't Can't prove the 4 times thing. Yeah. So we'll just, you know, this is a probability argument, and I don't want to get into that. But it didn't actually get darker. So again, it's just another one of the, I don't know, there's so many ways to try to explain this, but you can understand, you put it on one light, and it's one source of photons hitting a surface, and obviously you put it on another light, it gets much brighter, okay? I mean, it's not an unsubstantial difference in what you can see. And the same argument is, well, it's also not an unsubstantial difference in what you can't see now. Because now you've lost the contrast between the dim areas, and because you're being flooded with the extra photons. I mean, noise pollution in discussions about light are real. They're not fake. They're complete. So again, this is the university graduates. It's just amazing. I don't know what the fuck he's sitting here just playing my videos. I mean, what's the point of, you know, I have to respond to my own video and say, yes, okay, I said that correctly. So good job, Gary. You did your job. Students. And they have a professor that they're paying, presumably some kind of decent salary. So you do the math and you figure out, well, what's the agenda of this university, right? 8 students can't possibly justify their budget. So what is it, a Christian university? I mean, what's the game? You don't have a physics department that graduates 8 students unless the students can afford $100,000 a year. So clearly something's wrong with that picture. Christian propagandist there.
Just play this in full screen. So right now he has 2 slits open. And then
okay, so let's. So look how sloppy this is. Obviously, you're not going to be able to see. There's no distinct darks here, right? So even by their own argument, this should be 50-50, and it's nowhere close to 50-50, right? There's no darks here almost at all. So obviously, the 50-50 thing is even garbage. You know, the idea of being in phase or out of phase is kind of mush, because what we're seeing is basically it's more likely the photons are in phase than completely out of phase. That a partial in phase is still going to make a photon. So you're making more photons than you are making dark spaces. But obviously anybody who knows anything about optics means that yes, I can change how precise this looks by just changing the contrast. And look how this contrast has been flooded.
Understand that the principle is when 2 slits are open, there's 4 times as much light where the little balls are. So I would argue 4 times. Maybe he would argue 3 times. I don't know what his argument would be, but the ball should be much, much brighter. So when there's 2 slits open, the little balls are much brighter, and this little place in between them should be much darker. Now the reason why there's little circles, you know, is because they got...
See, they didn't measure how many photons. You know, these are simple experiments that have never been done by physics. So just understand that. They've never done any of these experiments, like just put a light on and see how many photons hit this space. Then put a slit in and see how many photons hit this space. Okay. And because that would tell you something, right? It's gonna, if it's less photons for this space, then you know that, well, something's in it, you know, something's blocking the photons. Okay, even though I have the space opening is the same as the space opening on the surface, I'm going to get less photons because the surfaces are going to bend some of the photons. They're not going to hit the surface. And then, you know, do exactly this. You know, just measure the absolute number of photons hitting a surface. They don't do any of these experiments, so we don't even have that comparison. Cover one of the slits. How many total photons hit the surface for a given area, say a foot long? How many actual photons hit the surface? They didn't do the experiment.
The laser too close to the slits, and so the laser isn't spread enough, and so it's not producing it even over the whole thing, kind of over the slits, and so you're getting actual images of little balls, right?
So that's another part, right? Is this pattern can look so many different ways. It can look like straight little lines, you know, very precise. It can look like little squares. It can look like rectangles, and then it can look like little round balls. And that's all based on how good your slits are, how smooth they are. Lots of things will dictate how that pattern looks. So this isn't, you know, you can't do this crude slop physics. You have to understand that there's a lot of variables here that you have to be cognizant of.
One of the slits with an index card. And when he does, these dark bands, these bands were less like...
Real untechnical experiment, right? And the device he has a little option that allows him to do that very precisely. So why is he doing it with an index card? I have to ask the question, right?
is reaching the board.
And you would imagine the single slit is the single impediment has to be fairly small. So, you know, this idea of you're sliding this card in there, the paper fibers alone could be, you know, creating interference.
Obviously, it's another source, it's another surface. You can't really block it out here. You do have to block it at the source. If you block it in the field, you're just putting another surface, okay, to diffract light. The surface diffracts the light, spreads it, scatters it. And so now you're going to add more potential to create a photon on the surface. More potential for two pieces of light to meet and create a photon.
Says him. Okay, we're gonna get there. There we go. So this is the best they can do, right? I mean, this is the simplest experiment. You know, it's only 2 slits and a flashlight, essentially, right? That's all you got. 2 slits and a light source, and some place to display it. Wow, real complicated experiment, and look how bad this is. Look how desperate it is. So this is the foundational nonsense for all of pretty much the woo of quantum mechanics is built into this experiment. Many of the physicists will concede that point. And so we're arguing over a principle where they're saying that, okay, there's light hitting a surface, okay, and that magically, okay, with one slit open, and magically when I open another slit, I let more light in, okay, that this part here, this part here, and this part here, and this part here go dark. That there's no photons hitting there anymore, okay. So that is a dramatic statement to make, that all of a sudden photons that were doing this and doing this and doing this and getting all these places all of a sudden aren't getting to those places because I opened another slit. All right, and the point is, though, is that these places are 4 times brighter, 4 times brighter, 4 times. That maybe by his logic it's only 2 times brighter, but let's just say 4 times. For the sake of that's my argument. So, well, 3 times. Yeah.
Well, whatever. I'm just saying, no one's measured it, so that would be a key thing to measure. Is the single slit produce? When you have 2 slits open, are there twice as many photons hitting the surface, or is it more than that? That would be good to know, right? Not too technical, frankly, right? I mean, just they could do that with solar panels. They could do that with lots of things that would just tell them how many photons hit the surface.
3 times would be enough. So just 3. I could change it to 3. Yeah, 3. We'll just say 3 times brighter. So it's more than just adding the 2. It's not 1 plus 1, and that's how much you get. No, it's 1 plus 1 equals actually 3 in this case, because you're putting together parts by my theory. But anyway, the point is these are supposed to be really quite bright when 2 slits are open, and this is supposed to be dark. So with that, I'll leave this play his, you know. But again, this is foundational to all of quantum mechanics, and this is the best he can do in providing me their proof. In searching the internet, this is the best he can come up with as a look. You have to believe. So this is their have to believe evidence. If you don't believe, I can insult you, I can call you a crank, I can insult your intelligence, I can do all these things, call you a truther, call you a science denier, I can call you all kinds of names because I don't accept this as proof of something. I mean, that's how ludicrous their argument is. That's how bad it is. I mean, if this isn't the Inquisition, what is it then? I mean, it's just as badly founded. He makes jokes about, you know, whether witches float. And what is the difference here? He's saying he can insult me because I don't find this compelling evidence. Amazing.
Again, and shouldn't we expect that physics would do this? That they would be able to explicitly tell us, because they've tested it, how many photons hit the surface when there's 2 slits open and when there's 1 slit. They should be able to tell us exactly how many photons it is. Is it more photons? Is it twice as many? Is it 1.4? Yeah. You know. And the fact that they haven't even done the experiment. They're so disinterested in this subject, they're so disinterested in getting to the real truth, that they haven't even measured the intensity of the light that's creating the fringe pattern. I mean, that's how bad it is.
So this is the dramatic, you know, look how dark it got. Well, it didn't. All right, so let's understand this is...
So obviously you can see it didn't get very dark, but anyway. I mean, you know, it's kind of obvious from this pattern. There are no clear, hard darks between these balls at all. The darks between the balls are far from dark.
First off, we don't know what kind of audio exposure is on the camera, so right, this is already a problem. You know, whenever you're doing this kind of stuff, filming it, you have to remember to turn the audio exposure off, because it does screw up what you're trying to observe as a technical matter. It keeps recompensating for the amount of brightness.
So again, he chimes in nowhere here. I mean, this would be a perfect time for him to chime in and say, wait a minute, okay, I had a camera, it didn't have any auto exposure. It's all manual settings. I could have done time exposures. I could have done anything with it. It was a great camera. I took great pictures. No, he didn't chime in to say that.
And so he fools you. But anyway, so that's another one of the obvious things. Like, oh, the physicist has to have that explained to him. Shit.
I mean, isn't that pretty bad, right? That they're doing physics and I have to explain to them that you really can't do these comparisons between pictures taken with different exposures. That's really not fair to the science.
And if we zoom in really, really close here, You can see the effect even more.
Yeah, so I don't see the effect even more, okay? Personally, I don't see how, oh yes, it got much brighter when I closed one of the slits in between, you know, in this little spot here. You know, I close one of the slits and it gets brighter in the dark spots. You know, I didn't see that. So he's going to magnify it even more now. Yes, this is the bring it part, right? Which will really good. All right, so watch the two sides over here. Now these are supposed to be getting 4 times brighter when the circles are there, right? 4 times, or at least 2 times by his own argument. So the 2 other sides are supposed to be getting twice as bright as the other thing gets dark. So for all the light you lose in one place, you're supposed to be gaining it in the other place plus more. Okay, so but do you see any of that? Watch this dark spot here, and watch this light spot. Watch this one. Watch this lump. See if they change at all. And if they don't, then obviously something's wrong.
Okay, so let's watch again.
Let's watch
Some
it.
more light, watch it darker, now it's lighter.
Yeah. So what did you see there? Did you see any of this stuff change in any dramatic way? No, it didn't change in any dramatic way at all. It's supposed to be more dramatic, right? It's supposed to be getting much brighter, you know, in one state than the other. So I mean, I would make the obvious argument that the only way you can't, what you're seeing is the audio.
Obviously, you're seeing the audio exposure, right? That's all you're seeing. It's compensating for the brighter light by changing the amount of photons it's counting and seeing. And some of the photons will now disappear, turn dark, because you've taken away part of the light.
Exposure on the camera, adapting to the bright spots and just measuring them. And so yes, this gets darker because they compensated for this.
It's darker, now it's lighter again. Okay, so that should not be possible.
Right, okay, so that's his evidence. All right, so we're to believe in magitons, you know, their little, whatever it is, their whole little magical theory that the photons that never interact with each other anywhere else magically interact with each other when they go through a slit. Oh, that just totally changes my identity, and I totally change in a wave function.
Right. So again, these are arguments I've made over and over again, and they never provide any kind of reasoning. So I could argue about why it's a push universe, not a pull universe. And they won't concede that, yeah, that's pretty logical, that an elemental pull is pretty hard to describe, except to describe it as magic. And then I can make the same arguments here about how the thing elementally functions. We know we can't bang photons into photons. And the only way we can make a photon interact with another photon in some way is to put it into matter, have the matter do the interaction, and change the photons. But without the conduit of actual physical matter, we can't do these experiments. Even the whatever it's called, the little spinning thing, right? The little silver side, black side, it doesn't work in a perfect vacuum. So again, without matter to do the math, it doesn't spin. It doesn't work. It doesn't do what they're saying it's elementally doing, which is feeling the pressure of the photons. Well, that's actually not working. That'll come up in the other stuff, the Gosling crap, actually. But anyway, it's just, I mean, it's example after example after example of how they're just cheating the truth because they want to believe in Jesus.
And I totally do some probabilistic math and figure out what, so I have to believe all that crap based on that as evidence. And he says I'm an asshole, an idiot, some kind of fucking cranky moron because, oh, I don't find that very compelling. I don't find this picture of Mary on your toast all that fucking compelling, retard. You don't think you have to do a little better than that? You have a wooey theory of magic. And this is the evidence of your fucking why I must believe in your magic verse. And so let's understand, this experiment is so simple, right? And in the text, he's talking about an entanglement experiment, right? So they can't even get this experiment right. They can't even do this with any technical precision. And you trust...
Right, and they describe it as if it's an infinite pattern. They don't even get the part that, no, it's on an arced surface of the same distance. They don't have any of the details of this pattern at all. I'm telling you, tell me the outside dimension, and I'll tell you how big those little dots are going to be. Tell me the smallest dimension, and I'll tell you how big the envelope will be.
Them on LIGO and on their cyclotrons and all this other crap. You trust all of the assumptions they make about those experiments when they can't even make assumptions about this one that have any credibility. I mean, you can't get simpler. 2 fucking little holes.
I mean, how does it counter this argument? It's a perfect argument. All you people do is trust. You really don't demand to see it in any real sense, except as a vague, okay, it's good enough. Just show me your little cigar photo, you know, your little blob in the sky photo of a UFO, and I'll believe. I mean, you know, put the man in the monkey suit and, oh yeah, Sasquatch is real. I'll fall for it. Even if I can see the zipper in the goddamn suit, yeah, I'll still fall for it because I really want to believe. That's all you're demonstrating.
And a flashlight. And they can't do that experiment with enough precision to come up with better than this, you know, look at Mary in my toast evidence. All right. It's pathetic. All right, continuing.
If you assume that light is a classical particle.
So again, this whole argument that I'm arguing a classical particle, there's no such thing as a classical particle. This is your kind of language. It's kind of...
This is so bizarre, right? I mean, the whole point of me asking you to play my videos is for you to respond to the points made, and nothing. So I brought up camera exposure Did he respond to it in any way whatsoever? Nope, nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Crap you say, right? The photon isn't a classical particle in the sense that the photon isn't, as I pointed out, I've always pointed out, has always been a ray. Has always been a composite. It's not a particle, fuckhead. so right there, I mean, and this whole...
So again, where did he debunk that? Where did he show that can't be true? That the photon is just a composite object, that as Einstein stated, it's made of corpuscles.
The whole idea of what classical is, when the classical description was Huygens. The classical description is full of wavy bullshit. So it's just such a lie. Oh, disgusting. They play these games. You're the one with the archaic theory.
So all the, in all this time, I mean, this is years since I made this video. Years. And this is how they've upped the argument, is to just play my video making the argument, and they counter nothing said in the video.
Shithead.
And then it actually gets even worse than that. So it's
a piece of glass, which is a wonky ruling.
This is from MIT.
Yes, a video I've played.
The
MIT open courseware.
each
Yes.
black line is about 75 microns. And
So obviously you can't hear any of this. So I'm playing, right? This is a video from an old MIT, right? With lasers.
these
75 microns, so that is 75 microns. Yeah, so that's almost a tenth of a millimeter.
spacing between the black lines
No, there's 1,000 microns. So it's insanely small.
is about 125 microns. It's about 250 lines per inch.
So unfortunately he has it sped up. I can't fix that part. So I don't even know why he did this. I mean, the video's almost over. I guess he's not going to really do anything complete here at all.
So it's a diffraction gradient.
So what I did demonstrate is that he actually admits, okay, when he's doing the experiment, I have to change the exposure on the camera. He says it. That might be what I'm playing. Is where it actually says it. I have to change the exposure on the camera because you won't be able to see it unless I change the exposure on the camera. I have to make the camera capable of seeing, okay, more light. I have to open its aperture so more photons get in, or you won't see what he wants to show you. And so I showed that part.
It's not a slit.
This is then the this wonky ruling. This piece of glass with all these narrow slits on it.
Right, so it's a diffraction gradient. It's not a single slit or double slit.
The screen is as before.
I don't know, why is he playing this part? I mean, this isn't, frankly, the same subject.
Meters away, and again, the wavelength of light is 6,328 angstrom.
And there's a big lens there for some reason. See the big lens? Big lens.
So now,
So why did he cut it off there? Who knows? So that was his argument. I mean, he didn't really make an argument anywhere in here, right? He didn't draw anything, didn't show anything, didn't do a goddamn thing but pretend I never stated that you have to make sure your camera is taking fair pictures. And he didn't make sure of that at all. And yet he types all this bold text. So let's, again, I'll just point out. The photons are 1 billion times smaller than the radar experiment. It's 1 billion times difference in the size of the frequency of the photons. And likewise, the distances for you to be able to create these patterns are 1 billion times different. And that's why there's no double maxima. It's because the double maxima only shows up when you're getting very confined. It's only internal. It's this way interference, phase out of phase. This way. This way. The other pattern is created by this way and this way. Okay, understood? Two different kinds of diffraction patterns. The light going in, the light going out. Obviously the Brozo doesn't know any of that. Alright, so let's just stick to the one subject, so maybe I'll make a second video on his other video he posted. Okay, let's just see. I'm beginning to think there has to be more behind Moshman's, so again, what is this? Denial that sheer stupidity and lack of sensual insight. I mean, this is just such... No one in their right mind would deny the obvious. So it's obvious that photons hit each other in some magical way, that their little wave function exists. All of that is undeniable fact. Now, I think the brain, Gary, is damaged in a lot of ways, but functioning in others, whatever this crap is. So if he recognizes the facts, then he has to have something else behind his denial. So again, they didn't point out a single counter-argument to any of the arguments I made. The most important one being camera exposure. There's no counter-argument. I think it could be activism. Some activists deny the obvious. I shouldn't read his comments anyway. He's just a doxer. So I forgot about that part. Yes, I'd say some condition of the mind. Okay, what can you just imagine? This is their physics, counter-physics argument is to play this game. This Brozo creepoid. Okay, I mean later in these comments he's talking about hiring a pseudo hooker, you know, just somebody to strip for him. He's that desperate. He doesn't, you know, he's really that desperate. I mean, just think of how broken your brain has to be if you can't just imagine it. And you really have to humiliate a woman by bribing her to take her clothes off. I mean, just how tacky that is. Just how degrading it is to women. It's just amazing. He's proud of it. I think it could be activism. Look at this. Some activists denied the obvious in order to generate interest in their agenda. So this is exactly a profile in Piro. Piro is the wacky activist. Okay, he's going to make his thorium free energy nuclear plant. He's going to do, you know, he's going to build the nest. He's going to fight for the right to die. He's going to do all this stuff that he never did. All he did was, frankly, kill people. Maybe Gary is doing the same. He knows he is wrong. So again, this is just so silly. I know what a camera aperture is, and I know exposure. These are real concepts. Apparently, you don't know what they are. He knows that we know he is wrong. So again, this is in context. There's just no way to. You know, the context is I have provided insights into how the double slit functions that are undeniable. The fact that the two outside sources, the logic, the fact that there's a certain number of wavelengths of difference inside of that distance, and that perfectly correlates to half the pattern. That is, so if you want to know the total number of bars that will be created, the total number has to be right in that number, because you could draw the two lines straight across here and you could see that this spot over here is dictated perfectly by the length of those two lines, that this has to be in phase or out of phase based on whether this is a whole number or a decimal. I mean, these are facts I've pointed out that are undeniably correct, true, and they are not spoken by any other physicist. That's the fact here. To deny that fact is what they're doing. They're denying the fact that I have revealed aspects of these two patterns that no one else ever did reveal. No one ever pointed out those correlations, and they're precise and accurate correlations. The small distance creates the big pattern. The far distance creates the little pattern. That's a fact. Okay? And it's a fact I revealed. All right. No, so there's no I'm wrong part here. This is just such bullshit. You know, he knows he is wrong. No, I know explicitly that I am right, and you have to lie and cheat me to say otherwise. You have to cheat the arguments I've made. You have to demean and disrespect me in such a fundamental way to make this slanderous statement that there is any part of me that thinks I am wrong. That is just a silly nonsense. I'm fighting for the goddamn truth, and you people are evil, tyrannical terrorists trying to stop me. And that's all there is here. Lying, propagandizing, Nazi-esque, Muslimio, you know, tyrants. You are the owners of the truth. and you shall not be judged or questioned. You fucking tyrants. He knows that we know he is wrong, so again, just such crap. I know that you can't make an argument, you ballless coward. You can't take this fucking drawing I just did and explain how anything I said is inaccurate. Not a fucking goddamn thing. You can't make a response to my argument, you fucking coward. Okay, so this would then be irrationality in order to generate interest for his suffering. What the fuck that crap is. Best theory yet, he says. Oh, so that's some crap the other guy posted. God, you people are so disgusting. How the fuck there isn't anybody with enough integrity to say, no, I'm not playing that. I'm above that. Not one of you slimy scumbags. Okay, I'd say it's typical crank behavior. Camera exposure. Oh, he brought up camera exposure. That's being a crank. Maybe as big and wild a claim as you can. I'd say everyone else is too stupid or corrupt to see, and then claim victimhood. Yeah, it's exactly what's happening. You have to dox me, you have to post images of my family, you have to resort to any method whatsoever to try to shut me the fuck up. Because you don't have a counter argument. Your cult is being exposed, and just like Scientology, you're trying every way you can to sabotage me. Because I'm a fucking villain. Because I'm attacking your pristine and perfect, unproven bullshit of a theory. Your fucking goddamn Jesus theory. You're just a terrorist. That you're not being taken seriously. The only thing he would accept as evidence, yeah, you would not accept as evidence. Yeah, again, you have zero evidence on your side. You can't show me a single example of it taking 4 times the fuel to go twice as fast, and yet you'll just keep puking that completely dishonest pile of shit as if somewhere you proved it. Against his position is experiments that he had done, and that one thing he will not do. So again, I have done the experiments. It's just a lie to say I haven't done any of them. And I've pleaded that, yes, the experiment should be done professionally and well. That's my big crime again. So my big, huge crime is I'm advocating for well-done experiments. They're advocating for, let's bang wooden blocks into each other. Well, yeah, they have wheels on them, but they don't really work. He's got the time, the money, and the ability to do them, and he wanted to, but he won't. So this is just more lying. I've stated quite clearly, I'm doing this theoretical stuff. I really don't want to be wasting my time filing little pieces and doing all this other horse shit. I have things to fix here, okay? I got all kinds of maintenance jobs that I already do as part of my ability to keep myself alive, and I really don't want to do it here also, okay? And I frankly have offered money, okay, for people who can do it well to do it well, and they won't take my money. Those are the facts, again, that you liars can't deal with. All right, nothing is stopping him from some space to do the experiment. I mean, this is just such a lie, again. I live in a basement, a little corner of a basement. If he hasn't got enough room at home, but will he? Hell no. So again, where am I supposed to go exactly? God, you know, this is just such horseshit. These people are such disgusting liars. So Stephen Bro is talking to Piro, who didn't say anything, right? He just quoted somebody else and said, right on. I can see that does make sense. He's not really unintelligent. So their argument is, I'm lying. That's their big, profound analysis. I'm lying because I know what a camera exposure is. Okay. Or at least he doesn't always seem. It does take intelligence of sorts to concoct and endless stream of excuses. So again, they're the one with the endless stream of excuses. So let's go watch Brozo's endless excuse video for why the Mythbusters experiment was a fake. And he starts making up huge giant distortions. Oh, they distorted it. They had the wrong angles. They did all kinds of this shit. He just makes up a fucking story of excuses. Clay doesn't squirt out at the same rate because Clay knows that you're doing the experiment and it's going to prove there's no kinetic energy. So the Clay knows what it's doing. This is the moron who doesn't understand that different shaped objects penetrate things with different rates. That if you shape an object differently, it will penetrate something deeper. He doesn't understand that concept. Alright, so no matter how watertight the evidence is, so again, he's calling this watertight evidence. I mean, anyway, the excuses have to be plausible enough to fool the gullible. So no, they're attempted to challenge the intelligent. I wish a physicist, I'm begging a physicist to play my videos. I'll pay them money to debunk them. Up to $4,000 I've offered them to just debunk what I said, what I drew on this board describing the single and double slit experiment. I wish somebody to debunk it. I've offered them thousands of dollars to debunk the analysis, and you're all cowards and haven't come even close to dealing with my arguments. You just showed us how you debunk it with complete silence. Alright, he can find superficial faults. So he says it's a superficial fault to recognize that camera exposure is a thing. See, nothing's a thing to him. Angular momentum, not a thing. Round things, hollow things, solid things, doesn't matter. He doesn't care about a fact. Dropping round things into clay, that doesn't mean anything. He doesn't care about actual physics, which is understanding actual variables. And supporters must be wetting themselves with excitement that their superhero has done it again, debunked the debunkers. You're not debunkers. You're trolls. Okay. You haven't come close to my arguments, my actual arguments. Again, you're playing a video from, like, whatever, 7 years ago. Oh, the fact that he hasn't is neither here nor there. 5 years, anyway. For if he really all about the greater plan, his big agenda. Doesn't matter what my agenda is. Again, this is a messenger argument. You're supposed to be arguing the message. You're supposed to be arguing the argument I'm making. You're not supposed to be arguing me or my psychology or any of that crap. You're supposed to actually be making a physics argument. I'm making physics arguments. That's my focus. I want to do more physics arguments. I don't want to reply to a bunch of slanders about my character as a human being. I want to argue physics. You are the ones demonstrating you can't argue anything else but my character. FYI, if you get any more criticism from DraftScience for using his real name, so this is a lie, okay? He has used his own real name in his latest video. That didn't happen. And again, the fact that you can find some... I know Pierrot's real name. Because I know it, I should post it. Pierrot's used his real name in other contexts years ago, so I could use that as an excuse. He had a blog, he did this, he did that, so I can use his real name. That means I can dox him, and it's okay with you. I mean, this is their desperation. They have to make rationalizations for doing something that's on its face rude and obnoxious. If I don't publish, you should refer to me as the name for which I publish under. You don't sit there and play this game where you decide when how much control I have of my private life. It's just disgusting that you people would defend this. Thanks. A bit past worrying about calling him Gary. Yeah, I never asked you to do that either, because that's too familiar. You people are scum, okay? You're scum. Since that isn't common knowledge. Again, never my idea. I never asked anybody to call me Gary. Okay, but it's really rude in America, okay, to refer to people by their full legal name, because we know what people will do with that information. And we know it's just for malicious purposes. There's no good reason to go find out where the celebrity lives except to go terrorize them, right? Or to try to break into their house or do some other kind of evil deed. And that's all you're doing is fucking playing with something that is only dangerous. That's all it is. It's only dangerous to be playing with it. There's absolutely no reason for some rational person to say, I'll do that. I'll take the risk. You know, I mean, you know, if I doxed Piro and then some loony does something to Piro, you know, then you're going to be accountable. Why would you expose yourself to that kind of risk for no good reason? I just can't believe they rationalize excuses for this absolutely rude behavior. All right, so 100%, so Piro says 100% conclusive, nicely done. So this is their standard for evidence. So just like the Eddington experiment, they just couldn't care less that Eddington's, on his own words in his own journal, said, this experiment sucked. Okay, he didn't say those words. He said, I wouldn't stake my life on these results. After he detailed a litany of problems. His slides got wet. The weather was shit. Okay, it rained 5 minutes. Actually, you know, 5 minutes before he's going to take his pictures, it was actually raining. And it's a 2 o'clock in the afternoon eclipse in the first place. It's a shitty eclipse to start with. I mean, amazing what they'll defend as proof. I'd say so, but he will come up with some excuses, of course. The same excuses I actually articulated in the video from 4 years ago. The same excuse, camera exposure. Your answer to that excuse is what? You didn't take the pictures with a fucking camera where you could change the, you know, that you could put it in full manual. And you know it, you liar. Well, the video is so thorough and actually goes through exactly the sort of thing he will no doubt say again. Yeah, camera exposure. So how come nobody's saying the words? Will somebody in this comment section actually respond to the camera exposure as being a real concept? I can almost admire his technique of putting people off the scent by making hour-long videos. And the only reason why they're hour-longs is because you make a litany of accusations I have to defend myself against. A litany. All right. Hard to find just the right point to interject. Now, why couldn't he interject when I said camera exposure? Why couldn't he interject when I, made all these different points about the two sources and the two patterns not being in the different locations like Feynman drew? Because his sentence tends to just go on indefinitely. So somehow he's saying I'm saying extra words in this video. That it wouldn't be a perfectly reasonable thing for any person who is being attacked by all these people in all these completely indirect and sideways ways off the subject entirely, that somehow I'm not doing it appropriately. I'm not doing what any other person would do to defend themselves. Oh, I see. Because his sentences tend to just go on indefinitely, or it feels that way, constantly backtracking. Where am I backtracking? Rephrasing. Well, rephrasing is what intelligent people do. They try to say things as precisely and as accurately as possible. So everybody who's smart rephrases a lot. You'll see that pattern. The higher the IQ, the more their language tends to be more precise, and they constantly redefine the words and make sure you understand. The same thing, backwards, upside down, and sideways, until you don't know which bit to quote and respond to. So again, there were so many opportunities to interrupt that video and say, no, that point's wrong. No, that point's wrong. No, you're wrong about that. No, it isn't about 4 sources. No, blah, blah, blah. No, they didn't do any of that. I mean, just amazing. Oh, these scummy liars. Scummy, scummy, scummy. Alright, I suppose that's the way he covers basics. I don't know. What the fuck's the point of reading this shit? Doesn't have anything to do with it. After an hour-long video, blah, 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 blah. The videos are as long as they need to be, and that's a fact. That's it. And so he thinks physics should be done in 4-minute videos and 3-minute videos. That's the way you do physics. I think everybody could see that he is that he was talking nonsense and laboring the point. I mean, you know, Professor Lewin's lectures on their own are, you know, just, you know, hours and hours and hours to do physics. Just wasn't worth the effort. I'll let him run his mouth off, as Steve Garvey suggests is the best way sometimes. So again, what's the point? What's the point of playing my argument and then not responding to a single point made in the argument? I mean, just amazing bullshit. All right, this is the federal watch list thing, which is, again, that's just because a judge was insulted that a human being showed up in his court and announced that they have constitutional rights. And again, he was declared by the appeals court to be completely inappropriate and incorrect in everything he did. I was completely exonerated. Do you understand? He was found guilty by an appeals court and thrown off the case for being incompetent. Do you think you're accurately representing the truth, you liar? Okay. I mean, these are people who watch Fox News, apparently. By they, I assume you only meant Gary, really. Oh boy, that's a real challenge to do that one, wasn't it? Of course that's what he meant. Yes, I might have misunderstood, though. Oh, perhaps you are referring to his sidekick. What the fuck is this? The talking plant pop of a woman who would jump off a cliff for him. Oh, and now he's insulting Amanda, who has nothing to do with physics videos. Absolutely nothing. All right, so she is on a watch list too, question mark. So now they're speculating about a completely, so again, this is again like, why don't you just bring up my sisters? Why don't you just keep being as just disgusting scumholes as you can, and Pirro will endorse it. He'll just keep saying, yes, keep making these slanderous arguments, keep invading his privacy, keep attacking people who might be associated with him in any way. Just prove that you are terrorists. Just prove it. Thank you. I will try not to interfere with this, whatever that is. Why doesn't John Walker have an opinion? I think I see what he did there, John. Interfere. I don't know. So that's a joke. Oh, fuck. So again, the real truth is there's no interference pattern. There's no constructive and destructive interference. There's just broken photons and then rebuilt photons. And you can prove it in image data, that whenever you make a photon from two sources that are distinctly different, okay, like pieces from here and pieces from over here, you won't get an image. And it's only when the photons come from the same source, very close sources, the pieces, that you could make an image. So that's another part that will be demonstrated eventually, is that that's another way you could tell the difference. If the image data is destroyed, then the photons have to be from different places. If the image data is intact, then the photons have to be coming from the closer spots. So you can almost understand with the diffraction gradient that the image data is preserved. So it means that the the photons are primarily coming from the two sources close together. That's the more dominant pattern. That's the one you're seeing the image data in. And the photons that are being created from the outside sources are the noise that that image data is in. Alright, so what's this? Okay, you call that evidence? Oh yeah, that's right. It is evidence conclusive too. So again, they have no will at all to pay any attention to any facts regarding seeing the photons, measuring their intensity. All of those facts are unimportant to these people. It's very, very broken. Nice work, Steve. Okay, so I don't know. It's just pretty hard to understand how it's nice work when he completely ignores every argument I made countering their analysis. First, the fact that there's no place on the internet where this experiment's done professionally. doesn't exist. I don't know why I sat on this video for 3 or 4 years. Yeah, you got such an applause for another big pile of lie. I guess I get overwhelmed by the task of finding all the parts. So what parts did you have to find? You played 10 minutes of my video at least, maybe more, without an interruption. How was that any work on your part to make it into a video? But I managed to find them in pure luck while going through some, just no point. We were only just saying earlier how you find things when you're not really... Okay, so that's all side subjects. We'll just ignore the rest of their little chitter-chatter. All right, so again, he made no counter-argument to the simplest flaw in his... Just as the simplest flaw in his previous experiment was, he says hollow things roll the same as solid things, which is terrible physics. And in this case, camera exposure, huge elephant in the room. They deal with it at all? They even mention camera exposure? Nope. I mean, it's just pathetic. Pathetic. So again, anybody who's seeing, hey, you're like a conspiracy theorist thinking that all the, aren't they proving it? Aren't they proving that this is just idiocracy? This is just Muslims telling everybody else they have to believe in their theory or else? There's no integrity here. This is despicable behavior. All right, so probably another video coming.